So the first question, which cells in the testes are responsible for the secretion of testosterone, that is the Leydig cell. And then the cells provide nourishment to developing cells in the seminiferous tubules, they are the Sertoli cells. And then the correct sequence of sperm transport after the formation in seminiferous tubule, it is what? The rete testis, vas efferentia, epididymis and vas deferens. Then which hormone stimulates Leydig cell to produce testosterone? That is the LH. Then spermiogenesis refers to transformation of spermatid to spermatozoa. Acrosome of sperm is derived from Golgi apparatus. Middle piece of sperm contains numerous mitochondria. Secondary oocyte released during ovulation is arrested at metaphase 2. Mature ovarian follicle is called Graafian follicle. Ovulation is triggered mainly by the sudden increase in LH, luteinizing hormone. Usual site of fertilization is ampullary isthmic junction. First polar body is formed when meiosis 1 is completed. The hormone that maintains corpus luteum during early pregnancy is HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. Implantation occurs when the embryo reaches the blastocyst stage. Inner lining of uterus in which implantation occurs, that is endometrium. Which hormone is mainly responsible for maintaining endometrium during pregnancy, that is progesterone. Corpus luteum develops from ruptured Graafian follicle. Hormone responsible for milk ejection, that is oxytocin. And the first menstrual flow is called menarche. Average duration of human menstrual cycle, that is about 28 days. Which structure contributes to the formation of placenta, that is chorionic villi. Which hormone is secreted by placenta, that is HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. Which hormone is secreted by Sertoli cell, that is inhibin. One more is there, ABP, androgen binding protein. Okay, so these are the two hormones which is involved in the regulation of what? Testosterone. Which hormone stimulate growth and development of ovarian follicle, that is the FSH. The correct sequence of early embryonic development, that is zygote, morula and blastocyst. The fluid-filled cavity of a blastocyst, that is called as what? Blastocele. The hormone responsible for uterine contractions, that is oxytocin. Colostrum is especially important because it contains high concentration of IgA antibodies. The hormone responsible for milk production, that is prolactin. Which hormone helps maintain pregnancy by maintaining the uterine endometrium, that is progesterone. The process by which spermatids develop into mature spermatozoa, that is spermiogenesis. Which of the following is the correct chromosome number of a human sperm, that is 23. Which event prevents polyspermy after fertilization, that is the cortical reaction and changes in zona pellucida, that is the zona pellucida becomes the fertilization membrane. Capacitation of sperm occurs in female reproductive tract. So capacitation, only about 50% of the sperms reach up to ampullary isthmic junction, and capacitation, it is a process by which the sperm acquires what? The fertilization capacity within the female reproductive tract. So the answer is capacitation occurs in female reproductive tract. Which male accessory gland contributes fructose-rich secretion to semen, that is the seminal vesicles. The female reproductive structure that receives penis during copulation, that is the vagina. Which layer of the uterus undergo major cyclic changes during menstrual cycle, that is endometrium. Which structure connects the developing fetus to placenta, that is umbilical cord. Which of the following is not a function of placenta, that is the nutrient transfer, that is the function. And then gas exchange is also a function. Removal of fetal metabolic waste, it is also a function. The production of FSH, that is the answer. Which hormone is associated with the development of male secondary sexual characters, that is testosterone. Which of the following correctly describes oogenesis? It begins only at puberty, that is wrong. It begins during embryonic development, that is the answer. How many functional ova are produced from one prime site? That is 1. How many functional spermatozoa can arise from one primary spermatocyte? That is 4. Which hormone is secreted by placenta and helps in the development of the mammary gland? That is HPL. Which of the following is the correct sequence during the menstrual cycle? That is the menstrual, then follicular, ovulation and luteal. The decline of which hormones causes menstruation when fertilization do not occur? That is estrogen and progesterone. The average duration of human pregnancy, it is about 280 days. Which hormone is responsible for the development of female secondary sexual characters? That is estrogen. Last Question: which sequence correctly represents fertilization and early development? Fertilization, then the zygote formation, then the cleavage, then the morula, where it enters the uterus. So the stage at which it enters uterus, and then the blastocyst, and finally implantation.